and get other.
At the back.
Sorry to go back to the town crier.
That's all right. Sorry about the town
I
crier.
read that some
Great
the
idea.
first person to write down
Yeah.
a good idea is the person who owns it. So
There's no copyright in ideas.
exactly. So and it's not that you go around and somebody gives you a good idea but actually
Yeah.
you shouldn't, and you write it down and they say, oh, that was my idea.
Yeah.
Because you know, you're grasping ideas all the time. If you don't get the
Yeah.
idea, write it down, somebody else will also
Yeah.
go to the same. So
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
way of looking at the situation is if somebody gives you that good idea without any preconception about what the relationship is, if you write that idea down first, you own the copyright to that, and the other person,
Yes.
they may get upset, but they actually own nothing.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
It's more complicated than that, of
No,
course.
it's because there's a law in this country called breach of confidentiality. If you shout an idea out at the top of your voice in a pub, you're communicating it in circumstances that does not imply confidentiality. If you go into the office of a producer or an agent and you talk about an idea, the law says that that person owes you a duty of confidentiality. Look up the case called Rock Follies.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
3 actresses took an idea to Thames Television. They spent a year talking about it. There were no contracts. Thames decided they didn't want to do it with them. 2 years later they did it. We're talking 30 years ago.
Yeah.
The 3 actresses were awarded £500,000 because of a breach of confidentiality. The first person who writes it down does not own it, unless it's their original idea. But if they got it from somebody else, they do not own it because they were first to write it down.
I think
Equally,
he's referring to something else though.
Yeah, I think
We're
you
talking about a TV company, who's making TV. We're talking about someone in a party who is not a TV company, and there's no
No.
confidentiality.
you don't own the copyright. I mean, you know, one of the problems writers get very paranoid is that, you know, someone's developed something and then someone else comes up with something similar and they kind of somehow accuse them. The fact that you may be the first person to have written it down, as far as you know, doesn't mean that someone else hasn't written it down either.
And there is a zeitgeist that more often than you'd think.
Ideas seem to
But we all read the same newspapers. We all have the, you know, it's.
Should we worry about copyright? Because in America they've got the Writers Guild registration number.
Well, we would suggest. I mean, I did. So I would immediately register any script I've written with the Writers Guild. Yeah, it costs $20 or whatever it costs. You know.
You register in America.
See,
So
it's done online.
What's the difference here, though?
It's done online. Well, because there are equivalents here, but I've just always done it with them.
The
I don't
law's
really
different
know.
here.
The law it does change. Copyright is a very complicated subject. If you're writing in the film and television industry, there's a strong case for assuming a kind of global aspect to what you do, and obviously America is very central to the global film and television industries, and so it's not a bad thing, and it doesn't cost very much to register in America. There's two forms of registration for copyright in America. There's the Writers Guild of America, and they have an online system. So you know it only costs a few dollars. You can pay with your credit card. You just send your file up. No, anybody can do it. What that does is it provides evidence that your work existed in the form in which you created it on a certain date, and that evidence is potentially useful if there's a legal case of plagiarism, that somebody else has copied it without authority or has used it without making a deal with you, and so forth. There's also the US Copyright Office, which used to be called the Library of Congress. And the point about that is although you have basic copyright under international copyright treaties in the United States as anywhere else, if you want to take legal action to get damages for breach of copyright in the United States, it's not very easy unless you have registered it with the Library of Congress, US Copyright Office, and you would actually, the US courts would limit the amount of damages you are entitled to sue for if you had not done that. And those things, you know, if you're involved in a serious project, doing both of those things is going to cost you about $50 or something. So you might as well do it. It's easy and simple. The law in this country is much simpler. Basically, the simple rule of copyright is that it's this point about the first person to write it down. When you write something down, if it's your own creation, then you create a copyright work, literary or artistic work. And actually, there isn't any definition of that, so it could just be your shopping list or something like that. But the whole point of what we're talking about in contracts is that for a film to be made, for a television program to be made, the producer is going to have to gather up all the rights into a single package that producer has got clear control of. And while there are circumstances in which copyright is licensed, I won't get into the complications of that. Basically, that means the producer has got to get everybody to give the copyright to the producer. So whatever the Copyright Act says, you won't have that copyright by the time the film comes out. So the issue of the contract is, what are you going to get instead of the copyright that you have traded? You're going to get money, you're going to get fame because you're going to get a credit, and the contract will set out what you get for trading your copyright.
It's really important to understand that even though you write a speculative original script, the moment you assign the rights to the producer, you have no more right to write the next draft, unless you've got it in contract, than any other writer. You're a writer for hire on your own show, technically, because you've assigned the rights. But that's because film is a hugely collaborative business. It's also, you are assigning somebody else the right to bring all the other people into the business who need to make that film. You are just that person who's given that right. So you no longer, you can't sit there saying, oh, you can't change my script, it's no longer your script.